level, because I think you're all project directors or are going to be involved in some kind of project at CSC, and sometimes that involves changing policy to make your jobs easier, basically. So I really want everyone to have the skills to be comfortable, figuring out power structures, lobbying if you have to, figuring out policy, that kind of thing. And also, if you have any questions in the future or need any help with any of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, feel free to contact me. The email is ucla-lobbycorps@gmail.com, and I'll have it up at the end. Okay, so has anybody here done lobbying before? No? Has anybody talked to like a school administrator before? Kind of. Has anybody tried to convince a friend to do something? Or a parent?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, so a lot of people think lobbying is just talking to your representatives, elected representatives, or administration, or the president, whatever. But lobbying is actually a much broader term, and it can make it a lot less daunting if you think of it how the word actually is. And what it actually means is basically just using your influence to try to get someone to do something. So even when you're trying to convince a friend to go with you to Vegas or whatever, or join the CSC office, you're lobbying your friend. You can just think of taking those skills, like taking the skills you would use to speak to a friend or a parent or whatever, and then just moving them up onto like a little bit more of a professional scale. Okay, so, okay, so I was gonna pick this up, but I couldn't find tape. So, has anybody heard of backwards planning before? So this may be something that you already use unconsciously, but it's a technique that a lot of student activist organizations use because it really, really helps you stay organized and stay on track even when you have like a big group of people who don't get to communicate like every day. So what we usually do when we have some project or some goal that we're working on is we make a huge poster that has our backwards plan on it. We all do the backwards plan together, and then we have it up in some communal space where everybody can see it. So throughout the week, whenever anyone has time, they can come and check in on their own. So at the top, since we work in weeks and quarters, I generally like to do week 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Onto however, like when you want to finish the project. And then the last column is going to be what the final project, the long-term goal, what you want to accomplish. And then the next row is fixed dates. So if you have, say, an event planned on a certain day, or if you have something you need to do on a certain day, you put that in whichever week you are, and it'll remind you how close you're getting to that event. And then the last part is priorities for that week. So this is the part of backwards planning that's really, really useful. You set up your end goal, which sometimes is really intimidating. Hopefully everyone has huge projects that they want to accomplish. So this is the part where you break it down into smaller steps and figure out what you need to do. So the reason it's called backwards planning is because you start from the last column. In your last column, you put what you want to accomplish, like the long-term, broad, general goal. And then you work backwards to see what you need to do. So for example, if you need to have posters finished 1 week before your big event or your big project, that goes in week 4. And if you need to, recruit people to do the posters 2 weeks before the posters need to be finished, then that goes in week 3. And you work backwards until you are at the day that you're at now. So that doesn't really have to do with lobbying. It's just like a really useful tool that we like to use. So I thought I'd share it all. Okay. So advocacy. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Also, there's already been like a lot of co-programming between USAC offices I've seen, and it's at least more than I've seen in the past, which is really, really exciting. I think you just press Control. And a lot of co-programming with like different clubs coming together. I know Bruin Republicans and Bruin Democrats and YAL did like a big debate thing at the end of the year last year. And I'm really, really excited to see this because it's a great example of coalition building. So when there are groups that are like really, they may not seem like they have a lot in common, they have different broad goals, oftentimes there's one goal that you can all agree on, and when you put your resources together, it can help a lot. So if you decide to co-program with other offices or other clubs, which I really, really recommend, especially if you need to change policy along the way, then a few things to keep in mind. Oh, and it doesn't even have to be students. Like we've formed coalitions with teachers unions in the past and like campus workers unions, and that might help if any of you are working in LAUSD to have the teachers on your side and have people inside the system on your side. So a few things to keep in mind with coalition building is to stick to unifying issues. A lot of times you're going to have different goals, but stick to, when you're meeting with your coalition members, stick to the one issue that you all can agree on, the one thing that you all are going to get done together. Understand and respect each group's self-interest and internal process. They may not be able to decide on something at a meeting with you. A lot of groups will have to, come to you, you discuss what you want to do, they'll have to take it back to their group before they can take it back to you and give a decision. So you have to be patient with a lot of groups when you're trying to build a coalition with them. Contributions will vary, which is actually the awesome part of coalitions, is that everybody has different resources they can pitch in. But you can't always expect the other partner in the coalition to give as much money as you have maybe, or as many people as you have, stuff like that. And check and meet regularly for decision making, which is also really important, I think, with the backwards planning with any project, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So yeah, okay. Now teaching out loud. So power, there's an advocacy definition of power, and there are few vocab words that I'm going to be using throughout the thing that a lot of, like I said, the California student advocacy groups have kind of developed their own vocabulary so they communicate with themselves effectively. So one of the words that they've kind of given a special meaning to is power, which is the ability to make someone do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. So power, other people can have power over you. For example, administrators set the rules, regents set the budget, but you can also have power over people through things like lobbying. Okay, can you do that? So types of organized power, this is power that you would have over someone who generally would be considered above you. So if you ever have someone who's in a position that seems like they should be telling you what to do, these are the types of tactics that you can use to change the role of power. The first one is electoral. So voting, this works really well with city council members and state representatives, which is Bruin Lobby Corps' main targets. But even in school boards, school board members often are elected. And so if you have people who are registered to vote in that district, or even if you are registered to vote, it actually will go a long way, and you'll get a lot farther just with that little mention that you're registered to vote. You have the power to influence whether they keep their jobs or not. Also, side note, today is National Voter Registration Day, so at the end I have voter registration forms for anyone who wants to register. Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so the next one is direct action. And this is something that you may have seen on campus recently in the past couple of years, especially when the Regents meeting came here. But these are things like strikes, sit-ins, what other ones? Boycotts, anything that's the people who are being affected by something getting together to show their message. So Occupy actually did it a little while ago. That would be an example of direct action. Okay, media. So this is really effective, especially on a local level, because it's a little easier to get op-eds and pieces into local papers. And local papers oftentimes can affect the way that local officials make their decisions, because it's reaching specifically their constituents. Yeah, go for it.
So as students, media is a huge, huge tool, because the goal of the media is to tell a story. And the thing is, they're naturally antagonistic to usually the people that you're arguing with and trying to convince. And they're naturally sympathetic to students. Nothing makes a better story than a starving student begging to do something good for the community. And you can get up, in front of a camera or in front of a reporter and say, we're trying to do this, but we're being blocked by these big elected officials. Media is a huge tool for students because we have good stories just by being students.
And then the next one is legal, which is suing, which is not used very often, but I thought I'd throw that in there because It is a way to flip the power structure, and it is a way that some people use. Next. So the last one that we're going to be talking about is advocacy, which is basically another word for lobbying. So advocacy, like I talked about before, it's using arguments to influence somebody who has power to do what you want. Next. Power structures. Okay, so this is really, really important for advocacy. I cannot even tell you how many times people have gotten turned away from lobby visits or any kind of visit with a decision maker because they went to the wrong person. They went to the person who seems like they have a lot of power, who seems like they kind of deal with these issues, and that person would say, this isn't my job description, I can't make this decision, I wouldn't know why you're talking to me. So it's really, really important if you're going to try to change a policy or have someone make a decision that you first look at the power structure of who you're talking to so you know you're going to the right person and you're not wasting your time. Listen. So an example I used is LAUSD because it's kind of a complicated power structure because there are specific schools and then there's like LAUSD in general. But this is pretty easy to find. It's on the LAUSD website. But this is the kind of thing that you'd be trying to construct when you're looking at a power structure. And then when you're trying to make someone make a decision, you want to start at the lowest person who could make that decision, and then move up only if they say no. Okay.
Another great piece of advice, never take a no from someone who doesn't have the power to tell you yes. That means if they're like, oh, sorry, we can't help you on that, and then you say, can I change your mind? And if they go, no, well, my boss makes that decision, I'm just relaying the information, demand to speak to the boss. Always make sure you're talking to people who have the power to tell you yes, and make sure their hands are tied before you launch into your discussion.
And then, so when you're working on a specific issue, like I said, you want to start at the lowest person who would, or the person lowest on the chart who can make that decision. But just in general, it's always helpful to have a relationship with the people at the top. So for the UC system, these would be the Office of the President and the Regents. So there are always students at Regents meeting doing public comment, telling them what we think, showing that we are engaged and we're at their meetings and we're listening to how they're making their decisions. With LAUSD, that would be the Board of Education. So I don't know if anyone's working on a project that has to do with LAUSD, but I think you all have in the past. I would recommend trying to get people to go to the Board of Education meetings. Again, those are also easy to find, their agendas and their meetings on the website, which I can give you all at the end. But it's really, really helpful just to show that you're there. They'll be more willing to listen to you, seem more legitimate, more interested, more educated if you show that you know what they're doing. Okay, this one. Okay, so councils. This is kind of broad, and you want to do a power structure for whatever community council you're going to be working with, if you're working with a community council. But it is a little different than the structure of like USD or the structure of the UC, because they make a decision as a whole, and it's often really, really difficult to go to every single council member to try to convince them of your point. You probably won't have time before they have to make a decision. So the most effective way to deal with councils generally is to go and testify before them. So city councils, whatever, a lot of councils, most councils, will have an option for people to come in and testify, either tell their story or explain one side of the argument before they make a decision. And that's really, really effective, especially if you can have other people showing support that show up with you. Yeah, next. So if you're dealing with an individual person, like for example, you know one person that has the power to make this decision. I'm trying to think of an example. One that I talked to Omar about was, let's say you're talking to a librarian about some rule that you want them to change, or something that you want them to do differently. So this isn't a case where you can do a power structure and go above their head. It doesn't really work like that. You have to work with what you have. So the best way to deal with individuals is to be strategic about your targeting. So when we want someone to do something, we call them a direct target, or a primary target. So that's the person who has the power to make the decision. In this case, it would be the librarian. So there are also secondary targets. And the secondary targets are people who have influence on the targets. So maybe people that they work with, if you happen to know anyone who has a personal relationship, that doesn't often happen. But anyone who you know will talk to this individual a lot, sees this individual a lot, has some kind of influence over them. It's really, really helpful to also go to them, try to get them on your side, because they may have more influence than you do. For example, actually, I found a good example. So for the Board of Regents, we had, I forget what policy we were trying to change, but we were talking to the Board of Regents, we had students testify, it didn't look like things were going to go our way, so we went to Gavin Newsom and we said, hey, students voted you in, like you have the young people vote, we want you to, be responsive to us. Can you go to this Regents meeting and say, I think this should happen, I think this policy should change. So he doesn't actually have power to make the decision, but when he showed up at the Regents meeting, he said his piece, the media covered him more, and that swayed the Regents, having that other pressure on them. Next. Also, I just want to throw that out there again. BLC is a resource. We really want to be reaching out to clubs and other offices. So if you forget any of this, or you want help choosing targets, anything like that, help researching, just let me know and we'll be super happy to help. Okay, so scheduling. Once you've chosen a target, direct or primary, someone that you want to speak with, someone whose mind you want to change, sometimes it's going to be really difficult to actually get a sit-down meeting with them. So scheduling is really, really important, and it's a really, really good skill to have. Especially for people who are elected and have staff under them, you want to hit them with as many forms of communication as possible. So you want to send a letter, you want to call, you want to fax if possible. Just on the off chance that an intern picks up your call and hangs up. Or you mail it to them, it gets lost, or you mail it to them and they don't really look at it and throw the letter away. You want to make sure that there are tons and tons of chances for them to see your request and respond to it. And you don't want to give up until they respond to your request. So in Bruin Lobby Corps, we have a spreadsheet with everyone we're trying to contact. And so every time someone calls them, mails a letter, they'll put it up there. And so we'll have people who are calling, every week, every few days until they get back to us, basically. And it's actually pretty effective. You used to be scheduling before BLC did anything else to.
Yeah, just be tenacious. You cannot annoy them. They won't remember you enough to annoy them. What I used to do is I would call, then say, hi, I'm sending an email. Send the email and then call after the email and be like, hey, did you get it? Is it going into a file? If I hadn't heard back from them in 24 hours, I'd call them again and be like, hi, we have a meeting. Because the thing is, they're not malicious people. They're in public service, usually the people you're dealing with. But they have a lot of mail that comes through, and they have a lot of people demanding stuff of them. You can never annoy them. Just keep pushing until you have the meeting. And you just make sure you keep going, keep calling. Eventually they'll remember your name and remember who you are, and that's a good point where things start moving quicker with scheduling. But just never
Even if it's just because you want them, or they want you to stop calling. So here it's really, really hard to read. So I can send this to Omar if anyone wants it, but it's a copy of the scheduling letter template that we use. It's really polite, it's really straightforward, and it's really, really short, which is important because I worked in a congressional office over the summer, as an intern, and I can tell you that if there are letters too long, the scheduler will not read them. They will stop after the first few sentences. So here's a template you can use. I'll email it out, but it's basically this is who we are, this is why we want to meet, these are the days we're available. Okay, so, before I go into that, prepping for a visit and research. So there are two things you always want to research, and this isn't even necessarily for lobby visits, but for testifying or just for going into any kind of project. You want to research the issue and the people. So the issue, you want to know everything about your issue, not just the emotional appeals, but you also want to have numbers and facts behind your argument whenever possible, because those are really, really hard to refute. And then people, you always want to research someone that you're going to talk to, because a lot of times it can help you frame your argument. If you know that one thing is really important to this person, you can show them how it relates to that. Yeah, so.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So once we were lobbying a legislator and her daughter went to UCSB, and we were talking about tuition increases, and I'm like, you know, your daughter goes to UCSB, I'm sure you don't want to pay more things too. And just the fact that we knew her daughter went to UCSB made her listen more, it made her care more. It's like, oh, they know who, I mean, like.
And it's oftentimes like hard to be taken seriously as a student. We're young, you know, a lot of people have stereotypes of us, but if you show that you're knowledgeable, it goes a long way towards people listening to what you have to say. Okay. So lobby rules. Again, this is for any kind of meeting. We're going to try to get something across. You can go to the next one. This is the way that UCSA does it. You can organize yourselves however you want, have however many people going, but this is what we generally, oh, that's supposed to have writing. Oh, there it is. But this is the way the UC Student Association does it because it's really easy to stay organized. So I'm just going to give you this as an example if you want to use this structure, if you're ever trying to meet or lobby with someone. So there are 4 roles: facilitator, presenter, testimonial, note taker. Next. The facilitator is going to be the person with the most experience with that issue or with that person if you've met with that person before.